Hello, thank you all for joining us today online for our presentation by the Gordon Foundation on their DataStream project. My name is Meg Olson, and I'm the Manager of Operations and Communications for the Canadian Water Resources Association. I'm going to introduce Carolyn and Megan, our presenters today, after a couple of notes on how this webinar is going to proceed. First of all, we are recording this webinar, and the presentation slides and the recording will be posted on cwra.org afterwards. DataStream and the Gordon Foundation have some polls coming up for you during the presentation, so stay alert for those and have a chance to let them know some things about what you're thinking. And we will be taking questions for this presentation after Carolyn and Megan are finished. If you have a question at any point, please just type it into the questions tab in your control panel, and I'll read those out at the end. During the talk, I'm going to post a couple of links in the chat box as well, in case you want to save those links to follow up. So check your dashboard for those links as well. And now I'll introduce Megan and Carolyn. If you two can turn on your webcams real quick. There we go. So we have Megan in the gray sweater. Megan is a limnologist whose Megan Thompson is a limnologist whose professional research and academic work has focused on pollutant and climate change impacts to lakes and rivers. She is focused on water quality impacts of terrestrial linkages and inputs like permafrost thaw, industrial surface runoff, mine tailing spills, and effluent release on freshwater systems, especially in northern Canada. Megan is an independent consultant supporting the DataStream initiative as a technical science advisor. And we've got Carolyn in the red jacket. Carolyn joined the Gordon Foundation in 2012 and is currently the director of the water program, where she works with partners across Canada. This work focuses on improving freshwater stewardship through citizen engagement in decision-making and the use of the best evidence available. Carolyn is a passionate advocate for open data and has led the development of DataStream, an open access platform for sharing water quality data. Thank you both for presenting with us today. And Carolyn, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. You can see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so thanks to everybody for joining today, and thanks for having us. We're so pleased to be able to present on this Canada Water Resources Association panel. So I am Carolyn Dubois, and I'm really excited. I think this is Megan and I have actually never presented together, but this is sort of a unique presentation in that you'll be getting from me some of the programmatic aspects of DataStream and some of what the Gordon Foundation has been thinking and building it and growing it. And from Megan, what you'll be hearing, Megan's been working with us through so many of the technical questions that we've had to answer as we've been scaling DataStream. So this really is sort of a unique presentation in the sense that we're kind of going to talk about the broader program objectives, but also get a deep dive into how we've tackled some of the bigger issues around open data sharing. Okay, so I've given you a bit of an overview, but we are all just to sort of lay it out for you. We're going to start with a bit of an origin story, as we affectionately call the beginning of DataStream, and our evolution since then. Then you'll hear from Megan on the importance of our data standard and how that's foundational to DataStream. We'll provide some opportunities for how CWRA members can engage with us and with DataStream, and provide you with a sense of where we're going with this initiative. So before we get going, we are going to start with a poll just to get a sense of your familiarity with DataStream. So Meg, I think you're going to put up that first poll question. And just a heads up, Meg, that I can't actually see the poll on my screen. So you'll have to let me know when it's up. Okay. Okay, so I think, okay, now I get to see the answers. Okay, so 25% of you are very familiar. So that's good to hear. But there's also a lot of people on the call today or on the webinar that aren't familiar with DataStream. So hopefully we're able to answer some of your questions. And please do feel free to submit any and all questions as we go through the panel. So I think we're ready for the second poll, just to get a sense of what kinds of data you're interested in. So we can put that one up as well, please. Great. Okay, great. So lots of people interested in water quality, which is great to hear. And also lots of groundwater quality and quantity folks, among others. So DataStream is a water quality platform, as you'll hear. So hopefully we've got some, there's some good content for you today. And so I guess we're ready for the last and final poll. Okay. So it looks like everybody is interested in a demo. So we'll do that as part of this presentation today. Okay, great. So I'm going to get started. So it sounds like there's a real mix in terms of people's familiarity. So with the platform. So I'm just going to start out by giving you a high-level overview of what it is. So DataStream is an open access online platform, and it's designed to share water quality data and to access water quality data. DataStream is free and open for anyone to use, whether it be contribute data or access data. And some of the things that we focused on in building DataStream, and you'll see this when we demo it, has been to provide user-friendly visualization tools and also map-based searches. And so I'll just highlight that at this stage, just to say that one of the things that we've been working on with DataStream is, yes, it's used by experts, but we also want it to be accessible and useful for non-expert audiences. And for everybody, whether expert or non-expert, we want to make sure that the system is as easy to navigate and as intuitive as possible. So you'll see when you get a chance to see the site a little later, you'll see that that has been an area we've focused on and that we're continually improving upon as well. So just for some context, I do like to provide sort of the backstory of how we found ourselves involved in building this software, because I think it's important for understanding, you know, where the Gordon Foundation has come from on this, because it really does explain sort of our direction and where we're going with this platform. So if you're not familiar with the Gordon Foundation, we are a 55-year-old organization based here out of Toronto. And for a large part of our history, we've focused on water issues, especially within the last couple of decades. And a lot of the water issues that we were interested in were sort of across the entire country, but we came at it sort of from a policy lens, so water policy issues. We also do a lot of work in the north, just so that you're aware. We do sort of leadership development with Northerners, among other programs. But what we like to say is that a common thread through all of our programming is we're seeking ways to help people and communities be involved in the decisions that affect them. So that's sort of the common thread through everything that we do. And I would argue, and I think you'll see that that's very much what we're working towards with DataStream. So DataStream came about, it was about 8 years ago. The Gordon Foundation was interested in focusing its water programming on Canada's Mackenzie Basin. And at the time, we were asking ourselves, you know, what's a good role that the foundation can play to make sure that the Mackenzie Basin, which is vitally important, make sure that it is protected. So what we did was we commissioned sort of a group of experts, and that's everything from legal experts, policy experts, you know, scientists, you know, people who are sort of working within governments, for example, to come together and discuss, what has to be done to protect the Mackenzie Basin. And they wound up publishing a report that came out of that. And what was really interesting to us in looking at that report was that what we found was that it's really difficult to assess sort of even the state of play at the time in the Mackenzie Basin because they were having a really hard time getting their hands on data. And we thought that that was an interesting problem, the fact that it was, there in some parts of the basin, especially, there's lots of research and monitoring happening. So why is it that we can't answer basic questions about water health? So that was one of the findings. Next was that any management, any water stewardship, if it's going to be successful in the basin, it needs to be two things. It needs to engage communities in that water management. They should be actively engaged in that. And secondly, that it should be transitory in scope. So we have to think beyond our provincial and territorial borders and be thinking about the basin as a whole. So that was sort of our entry point. And we got to work and thinking about, okay, so what can an organization like ours with our scale do within this region? And so we began working with the government of the Northwest Territories. And the reason that we were interested in working with them was that at the time they'd recently developed together with communities and were in the process of rolling out the Northwest Territories Water Stewardship Strategy. And this strategy is really, I'd say, leading edge in a lot of ways. But one of the things that we were really excited about was that they were putting their money where their mouth was in terms of community engagement. And so what the strategy laid out in the action plan was to develop a community-based monitoring program that would sort of, for the whole of the Northwest Territories, and involve communities directly in data collection. And that's what they did. So they got this program started. It's still operating today. It's within 21 communities. Some of the things I think people on this call might be interested in is that you had communities all the way from the Alberta Northwest Territories border up to the Arctic Ocean, who are all collecting data using some complex, in many cases, they're able to monitor sort of a huge array of different parameters. And because they're all using the same methods, all of that data, is one single data set sort of for the whole of the Northwest Territories. So it's pretty exciting. So we were really interested in that model, that idea of communities being directly engaged in that data collection and beginning to answer some of the questions around water health. And we thought, okay, well, what role could we play? And that's where the idea of building a data system came about. We worked very closely with the government of the Northwest Territories on sort of conceptualizing this piece. And the idea was to begin by using a platform to share the community monitoring data that was being collected by those 21 communities, but to expand beyond that longer term for the whole of the Mackenzie Basin, because people in the Northwest Territories, obviously they're interested as well in what's happening in Alberta and other places, as the water moves up towards the Arctic Ocean. So that's exactly what we did. We built and launched what is now Mackenzie DataStream. And that at the time, it started out, of course, with that first data set, which you'll actually get to see a little bit later, and has expanded considerably ever since. And what was really exciting is that when we launched Mackenzie DataStream in November of 2016, we knew that we were tackling or filling sort of a pretty big gap in the region we were in. But what was really interesting was that once we started to sort of tell the story of Mackenzie DataStream, is that people started to come out of the woodwork across the country saying, we actually have some of the same problems. There's a lot of data being collected, but there's no real way of sharing it. The common challenge I think many people have experienced, which is you sort of have to know somebody who knows somebody who has the data in order to get it. So you actually have to know who's out there monitoring as like an entry point to be able to find data that might already be out there. And that's obviously not sort of the most efficient or effective way to be sharing data within a large region. So what ended up happening was, in seeing all of that need across the country, we knew that in order to be able to have some of the same success that we had in rolling out Mackenzie DataStream, we would definitely need some strong partners if we were going to work in other regions. And so it really came about organically in Atlantic Canada. We wound up partnering with the Atlantic Water Network, which is out of St. Mary's University. And they'd done a ton of work in pulling together and working with watershed groups in Atlantic Canada. So there's lots of groups who have been out monitoring, many for years and years and years, and who have collected data. And the Atlantic Water Network had already pulled some of that together and had some of that online, but really wanted, DataStream and sort of, a system that was going to be continually evolving and growing. So they saw a lot of benefit in working with us. So we're working very, very closely now with the Atlantic Water Network to continually grow DataStream, Atlantic DataStream, which launched in June of 2018. And then just last year, we partnered with the Lake Winnipeg Foundation out of Winnipeg. And they've been an incredible partner as well. So the same kind of thing. They're very, very well positioned. They're working, they're actually rolling out a community sort of citizen monitoring program around sort of eutrophication in Lake Winnipeg. And so they were a perfect partner for us to get started in that part of the country. So it's just something to emphasize is sometimes people will ask us, they'll say, okay, well, once you knew that there was demand across Canada for DataStream, well, why not just blow the whole thing open and just sort of make it available to anybody, maybe anywhere in the world, to put data online? But what we have found and what we've been learning is that the connections within the regions and that networking is vitally important in building trust and getting people on board with the idea of open sharing, and really building a sense of community as well around the hubs themselves. So people are sort of like, well, we're in the same watershed, so we'd like to be able to share here. And we've convened around our actual hubs, and we see a tremendous value in that. So anyhow, at this stage, across all 3 of the hub regions, we have 80 different groups sharing data on DataStream, and we're very much still growing. So this is a graph just of our growth in data holdings. This is just last year. So that top line is the total data holdings across all 3 DataStream platforms. You can see that spike there where it sort of goes up vertically, and that's when Environment and Climate Change Canada contributed data. So just something to highlight here is that not only are we bringing in now community-based water monitoring data, we're also bringing in data from governments and from academia and others. So the pie chart on the left here is of proportion of total observations on the platform. And you can see here that community-based monitoring still takes up sort of the lion's share or generating the lion's share of the data that's on DataStream. The federal government there in green is next. And then we also have provincial and territorial governments, Indigenous community monitoring groups, and then that small sliver there is researchers. Interestingly, I will just highlight the researchers here. This is academic researchers, but these researchers are those who are working in the Northwest Territories and are funded under the Cumulative Impacts Monitoring Program, which is a territorial funding program. And under that agreement, if they're collecting water quality data, they're actually required to share it on DataStream. And that's been highly successful in bringing sort of more researchers to the table, and that's something that we're looking to grow more and more, because we think there's some really great data out there that people could use. So we're going to hand it over to Megan at this stage. I'm just going to say sort of one last thing before she dives in, which is people will often ask us, okay, well, you have DataStream in all these regions, like what kind of data are people, like what kind of data is in the system? And our answer is always, well, the data that's in the system really, it depends on, it's very much reflective of what people are worried about, thinking about, interested in researching. And so Megan's going to explain sort of how is it that we've been able to kind of maintain a level of being sort of scientifically robust while also being flexible enough to accommodate data collected by a huge, vast diversity of monitoring efforts. So I'll hand it over now.
Thanks, Carolyn. So I think I am sharing my presentation screen. I'll just try to, there we go. I hope someone will let me know if that doesn't look right. This is Megan Thompson, in case anyone forgot my name. Yeah, thank you very much, Carolyn. That leads me right into some of the things that I wanted to discuss a bit about the differences across these regions and the process that we've gone through to deal with these different types of data. As Carolyn mentioned, the DataStream started in the Mackenzie Basin, and the focus of their sampling was, there's a lot of different types of data on that DataStream, but certainly the original data, the focus on the CBM program, was looking at publicly sharing that data across the territory with concerns about contaminants, change over time, and very much interested in sharing with the different communities that were involved in the program. But and so DataStream was sort of built initially very much around that data type. When we moved to Atlantic Canada, and because it's such a diverse area with so many smaller watersheds and so many different groups involved in collecting data, we very quickly realized that we had to expand the capacity for different data types once we moved into Atlantic Canada, and that was when we made our major change. But then, we did run into some new issues as well when we moved into Lake Winnipeg. So whereas Atlantic Canada was dealing with some land use concerns and the effects on water quality, Lake Winnipeg was very focused on, at least initially, on that issue of eutrophication and also nutrient loading. So we had to think about somehow incorporating things like flow as well. So when we were looking at how to expand or how to move into a different data model, or into one that provided that robustness but also that flexibility, we were dealing with, I think, sort of an eternal problem in Canada. There's a few data problems in Canada, as Carolyn mentioned. First, you can work in a place like this in the picture in the Northwest Territories, where you have an enormous number of water bodies, many without names, and no existing data usually when you go in. Certainly nothing that's readily publicly available. And so DataStream was definitely meant to address that. But then at the same time, you have different situations like in northeastern Alberta, and I do some work there as well, where you have quite a lot of intensive monitoring and water quality sampling going on. But it's being done by many different groups over different time frames with obviously very different methods. And then even within a group like the federal government sampling, that you can see a picture of their site here, each actual type of water quality data, and then sediment data and all that sort of thing, is actually sort of stored differently with a different format. So it's a bit of a nightmare. It's certainly very inefficient to try and combine data sets from multiple sources, but it's something that many water quality scientists and water scientists generally have to spend an awful lot of time and money doing. And so it's a difficult problem. It's been around for a long time. And we were wondering how to do this right, given the chance that we had to expand into these different regions. So the first thing we did was to look to see if there was something already out there that we could use. We didn't really see any need to reinvent the wheel if something was out there that was working. We did look at a few options in Canada. Environment Canada certainly tries to standardized water quality monitoring data, but we found that it wasn't quite flexible enough for the different types of data that we're dealing with. We did look to the US, and we also just looked to open data standards generally. So we did look at sort of a standard called Water ML2, which is more of a continuous hydrological data format, so more water quantity. Which is good. It definitely had overlap with water quality, but then we also came across the US EPA WQX system, which was specifically focused on water quality data. And we ended up settling on that as a starting point for our data model. So the WQX system focuses on water quality, as I said. It was built over time to accommodate a wide variety of users. And actually a wide variety of water data types. So not just water quality, but to some extent water quantity, also sediment quality, groundwater and groundwater quality, and also some biological measures as well. So it looked like it was a good option for us. And we were actually able to contact the team who has worked on building and maintaining the WQX system, and found that they were willing to help and collaborate with the Gordon Foundation's work on DataStream, and to we figured, I guess, that there would be good support for this system as well, because the EPA had already invested quite a bit of time and effort into it. And I'll just point out that the WQX team is actually joining the DataStream group for a webinar in June, but we'll have later data or information about that later. So getting into some of the details, the way that the data schema was handled in WQX was that there is data sets that are owned by data stewards or uploaders. And the data sets have metadata attached to them. So as an example here, you can see a bit of a screenshot from a DataStream site here for the Lesser Slave Watershed Council, and that's in Alberta. So they have uploaded data. You can see their name and their contact information. You can see the start and end dates. There's a DOI actually assigned to this data set. And there's an abstract, which is quite helpful because it's basically used to allow an uploader to provide a bit of an explanation about where, how, and sort of generally what their methods were that they've been collecting water quality data. Then for each data set, there's the observation level information that's included for every single observation. And I think there's something like 37 different fields for every result, every observation that can be filled in DataStream. Some of those are optional, but some of them are mandatory. And they are grouped into generally information about the location of the sampling, so including coordinates and water body types and names and that sort of thing. Also sample collection information. So we do actually allow people to upload QA/QC sample data. So we have the ability to choose whether you're uploading sample data or some type of blank or some kind of quality control sample from the lab. Obviously date and time, but we also have some information about collection equipment, and then also looking at depth and also height. We have some air or some, I guess I should say, meteorological data that we do store as well. Then under each result, we have quite a lot of information about the actual water quality parameter, which we refer to as characteristics, and speciation, really specific information about sample fractions in terms of whether you're looking at a dissolved or a total. We also allow for information about detection limits. So different types of detection limits and flagging data to show that it is being reported as below detection limit. At this point, we also decided that we probably should figure out what we actually were going to do, because when we realized how large WQX was and how capable, we also realized that we could do an awful lot. The question was, should we right away, and how far should we go? So in the end, we decided that the role of DataStream was to provide a place to publish data openly. And you can see that kind of on that schematic here, that DataStream is basically a storage and sharing platform for data, and that we're providing support to format and upload that data to really achieve that standardization, and also to confirm or to verify through validation checks that the uploaded data meets that format requirement. But at the same time, we also decided that the role of DataStream was not to actually collect, fund, or own any of the water monitoring data itself, and that we do not provide analysis or interpretation of results. We also do not QA/QC the data in any way. And the reason for that is because of, well, there's many reasons, but from a technical perspective, it had a lot to do with not wanting to limit data, and considering the great variety of people that we have uploading, we didn't think that we could apply a QA/QC protocol that would be a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. And instead, what our approach is more to provide as much information about this data as possible. So like I said, to allow for lots of explanations about how the data was collected, to allow QA/QC data to be provided, to very comprehensively document precisely what was measured, and also allow for reporting of below detection limit and various types of detection limit or quantification limits as well as providing things even like, which lab analyzed the data. So that's where we kind of decided we fit in. So having gone through all of that, having sort of explained how we ended up with the data schema that we have, and also explained a little bit about our approach and what we have decided the roles should be of DataStream. I am going to show you a couple of slides here of examples of data sets on the site. So there's the 3 different hub sites right now. And so you do need to go into each one to look at data from those basins. This example is the Alberta Lake Management Society Lake Keepers water quality data. So this is, I believe it's an NGO who is doing annual sampling of lakes in Alberta. In this case, you can see that their data actually crosses the basin boundaries between the Lake Winnipeg Basin and the Mackenzie, but they were actually able to upload their data one time, and the data actually showed up in both of the different hubs. So that's kind of how we approach that. But you can see this is a map view of the sites. They're all color coded. Right now, this is just a screenshot, so I can't click on anything, but this on the left side, the bar here is the project metadata. Just gonna get some water there. Okay, so you can see that the data information is there with an abstract talking about, generally speaking, how the data is collected and what the goal is. This is another example. This is environment and climate change data that was uploaded for Newfoundland and Labrador. There's actually environment and climate change data in every one of the basins right now. This is a map view again, but here, this is how you are looking at a site menu instead of the metadata on the left-hand side. So there's very good coverage with this Environment Canada data in Atlantic Canada. And a lot of this goes back, quite far in time. This is an example of the plotted data. So we do plot data with very basic figures. So this is just over time, dissolved organic carbon. This is from the Northwest Territories Wide Community-Based Monitoring Program. And these are the sites listed on the left again. They're color coded, and you can see that they have been doing annual collections at least for several years now. So at this point, we had actually, these are the sort of examples that I've shown in the past, but there was a request for a demo. So if it's all right, I'm going to back out of that presentation and get into a browser. I hope someone will tell me if they're not seeing what I think they're seeing. But I think you're saying DOC data from the Northwest Territories Wide Community-Based Monitoring Program. Again, this is the exact same figure we were looking at in the screenshot, but I can show you in this particular data set anyway. There's an awful lot of parameters or characteristics to choose from to view. So this is dissolved organic carbon. As an example, this is ammonia. This kind of a view does definitely help you to understand the temporal coverage of these data sets, how far back the records go. And in this case, it's also showing an applicable guideline for CCME, so the federal recommended guidelines for protection of aquatic life for ammonia. At the same time, you can click on the map view and have a look at the coverage of this site or of this program spatially. And you can click on any one of these to look at that particular site. As I said before, this left-hand side panel has the sites visible. And the metadata is here as well, depending on what you want to view. But you can also back out of that data set and take a look at the basin as a whole. And if you wanted to zoom into the Slave Lake region, you can see they group sites until you zoom in, but you're basically getting an idea of where the sites are located. So these are all the sites across all the data sets. So for example, this site here is a SIMP That's the academic researchers that are funded by the Northwest Territories government. So that's a SIMP site there, and you could click on that. This is another SIMP site, I believe. Here is, as an example, an Environment Canada site. So we click on that, and now all of a sudden we're in that data set. And the visualization loads, and again, you can look at one or several different sites. So if you're interested in a data set right now, you download here as an option. And you do get some licensing information with the download. You get an actual Excel file with the data, but you also get information about the origin of the data. So we have, I have some tabs open here. This should give you an idea, I guess, of what you see when you go on the DataStream sites. And this applies to, you know, Atlantic DataStream. This is actually Lake Winnipeg DataStream data. This is some of the flow data that we had to incorporate into the DataStream. And we are planning some changes to the user interface actually to accommodate the particular challenges of flow data. But also on each of the hubs, there is a resources page, and you can actually download the upload template, which gives you an idea of the format that we use when you are uploading data. I'm not sure if I can drag this in, but here's the Excel upload template. So there's multiple tabs with instructions, but then there's an upload template with an awful lot of fields to fill in. And again, like I said, some of them are optional and some are required. So going back to the presentation, I just had a couple more things to do before I hand this back to Carolyn. Hopefully I'm not going too late. The opportunities for the CWA members here that are listening, and also just generally opportunities for the water quality research community, is basically the possibility of having data storage and sharing provided free of charge in a pretty well, I guess if I'm in my own opinion, pretty robust and flexible format. DataStream is quite transparent with the information, so the data scheme is actually available on GitHub in case any users actually do want to use that approach for their own sort of projects and to customize their own processes. There is an API beta right now being developed, so to automatically retrieve data, and it's possible right now to request a key from DataStream, the DataStream team, to take part in testing that. And I also just wanted to point out that the data model, as well as, you know, looking around at WQX and trying to find things that worked well, one of the things that we have always done is listened to our users, both the end users plus the data uploaders, in how we actually refine this data model and the data schema, even moving into things like the user interface. So a lot has changed over time, and most likely things will change in the future in terms of the usability of the site. And we have always sort of listened to the input from users in order to do that. So if you do end up using DataStream, you will certainly have an avenue to influence the data model refinement and refinement of the site overall. And I think this is where I hand it over to Carolyn.
Okay. Oh, I think, oh, okay. Show my screen. Hang on 1 second, please. Okay. Should be able to see that now. Okay, so this is the, and if you can't hear me, somebody let me know, Megan. So this is the sort of, we talked about sort of the past and how we came to be, and sort of the present and how the system works. And this is kind of like the future bit of this presentation. You've heard throughout a little bit about how DataStream is positioned. So I'm just going to sort of summarize that, and that'll sort of, I think, give you a sense as well of, about where we're going with this initiative. So in terms of our positioning, I think one of the things that's been really critical for us has been to be sort of the independence. So what I mean by that is, we're not a government. One of the really nice pieces of our positioning is that we don't ourselves collect any data, as Megan said earlier. Like we're not out there doing that, and we're not in any way in competition with those who might contribute data to DataStream. We're not restricted in terms of jurisdiction. Sometimes governments can be, within a province, for example. So we are able to kind of expand beyond any one jurisdiction. And we have found that this positioning has been very important for helping us attract new data contributors. So we joke a bit that this is sort of like the Switzerland of data homes, because everybody does seem quite comfortable putting their data onto DataStream. Importantly, the system's free to use. I've already said that, but I think it's important. One of the things that we work really hard at, not just by pulling data in, but also through convening, is connecting the research and monitoring efforts across sectors and across regions, is finding ways to kind of help where we can, when we are well positioned to do so. Sometimes others are better positioned, it depends where we are, but in helping to pull together some of these different efforts so that people kind of get talking, and you can get a lot more out of your work if you're working with others within a region. I think really importantly, a big part of what we've done throughout the development of DataStream is that we're helping overcome some of the barriers that people will often face when they go and think about open data sharing. So you just heard one of the big things that we've done, which is implemented the WQX standard. That solves like so many issues that people will bring up around making sure that when they submit their data, that data is that people are going to be able to interpret that properly. We'll have all the information they need to understand that data. So that's a big barrier that we see over again and again, is people worrying about that. WQX addresses so much of that. One of the other things we've seen a lot of is people having concerns around intellectual property. So, okay, if I upload my data to this system, am I somehow giving up ownership? How does that work? And if people hesitate a little bit there. And that's definitely not the case on DataStream. There's no ownership is given up. If anything, I'd say DataStream is a way of publishing data, and the ownership of that data rests with the contributor. So we've provided a system for doing that and making that very, very straightforward for people to use, using international open data licenses. One of the other things we've done, Megan showed it when she was sort of walking through the data schema, but we use digital object identifiers. And if you're not familiar with them, they're essentially like the library code that accompanies, most people will have seen them with journal articles. Journal articles have the DOI, and you're able to use that DOI to track where that article has then been cited and by whom. That's really powerful. And in the last few years, DOIs are now being assigned to data sets as well, which is huge because it gives people this incentive to put their data up. They will get a DOI for the data and then be able to track when and where that data is being used through, actually there's a Google data sets, which is a lot like Google Scholar, but for data sets. So that's pretty neat. Finally, we use blockchain technology to overcome one of the other barriers people sometimes, encounter when they want to openly share data, which is, how do we make sure that, there's sufficient transparency and that we know that the data we're looking at hasn't been tampered with, and that's precisely what we use blockchain for. Finally, and this is very important, is the Gordon Foundation has always treated DataStream as a program, not a project. And this is very important. So, we're not planning on a 2 or 3 year time horizon. We're committed to the long-term success of the platform. So you've heard some of that from Megan. We're constantly asking for feedback to continuously make it better. So people know that what's online now is only going to get better. But also I think it's important for giving people just assurance that we're going to be around. If they're going to put the time in to load their data and choose this platform to publish, they want to know that it's going to stick around. And with DataStream, that is the commitment that we've made. So in terms of future outlook, we are continuously improving. Right now, we're working towards the 3rd version of the platform. So the platform, though we do have 3 hubs, they're all built off of the same technology. So for that piece of technology, we're coming up on version 3, which will be launched in 2021. There's going to be a lot of exciting sort of advances with DataStream at that stage. One of them is going to be that you'll be able to do cross data set searches. So if you only care about DOC and you want data within a specific region and you want it from anybody who collected it, you'll be able to do that on DataStream. Pull all of those observations together and package them as sort of your own tailored packet of data rather than having to download multiple data sets. So that's one big thing. There's going to be a lot more. We're very excited about it. And in the nearer term, we're working on, as Megan mentioned, our API. We're beta testing that right now. So if you are interested in accessing that, please just reach out to us and we'll provide you with a key for using the API. And then finally, we're working on an ETL process, an ETL tool. So that's extract, transform, and load. So that's to pull data from other open sites and then load them into DataStream so that you can visualize multiple, even more data sources alongside the data that's already in the system. So we're continuously growing our data holdings, of course. We're also looking at expansion to different media types. So the one that's coming very soon is going to be, because by popular demand, people wanted to see us include sediment quality in DataStream. So we will be able to accommodate that. Again, in a lot of ways, because WQX is flexible, we were able to quite easily add that to the system. So that's coming soon. We're also looking at groundwater data, and that's something that we've been working towards is just figuring out, are there any nuts that we need to crack in terms of, what the differences are and how we'll pull that in. And we are talking right now about water quality, groundwater quality data. So that's something that we're investigating now because there does seem to be a lot of interest there. And I saw in the poll that there's a number of people on this call that might be interested in that. And finally, we are looking at continually expanding geographically. So we're sorting out the best ways to do that. There is demand for DataStream sort of across the board in Canada. So we're sorting out what pan-Canadian expansion of the platform will look like, while always maintaining a sense of community around regions, so that people don't feel they're just sort of throwing their data into a platform and it's sort of gone. It's like, no, this is something that you can kind of keep coming back to and you can get to know people within your region. So that's something that we want to sort through. But we are looking at pan-Canadian expansion and who might the right partners be in different places to get that going, because it's I think what people don't always realize is you build a platform like this and people do start coming, but it does take a lot of energy and sort of building that trust and knowledge and getting people up and running with a platform like this. So yeah, so that's on the horizon. I am going to do just sort of, if you're interested in what we've been talking about today, we are running a webinar series. It's called the Dive into Data webinar series, covering a range of topics. So you missed the DataStream online training, but that's okay. We did cover some things today. But if you were interested in what Megan was talking about around WQX and you want to dig deeper there and you're curious about how that system works, we're actually hosting 2 representatives from the US EPA on June 24th. And they've both been involved in the development and evolution of the standard, which has been around for a while. So, they can answer any questions about that. So if you're interested in that, please do register. Again, that's on June 24th. So I am going to once again thank our partners. We can't say it enough, the DataStream is only as good as the data that's in the system, and none of that would be possible, and pulling data in and getting those partnerships going without our regional partners. So that's the Government of the Northwest Territories, the Atlantic Water Network, and the Lake Winnipeg Foundation. And of course, none of this is, again, also possible without our supporters and contributors along the way. So thanks to them as well. So we'll leave it there, and thank you so much for tuning in, and please do not hesitate to ask us questions.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Carolyn. We have a couple questions in already. If you do have a question, please go ahead and type it into the questions tab in your dashboard. The first question is, I'm going to take my prerogative and ask the first question. How do you decide where to expand your data hubs to? What goes into that decision about where the next data stream is?
I'll take that question. I think the really important thing is because we're only a limited staff too, right? So we're limited in our resources. I think it's finding strong regional partners that can work with us. So that really has directed our growth so far, and I think will continue to direct our growth. Without regional partners, you know, I'm sitting here in Toronto. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but Toronto is not in any one of our hub regions. So having those regional partners is just really, really key.
Thank you. And then we have a question from Amir. Can you all describe a little bit more about what you mean by the data schema?
I'll hand that one over.
Yeah, I can try that one. Yeah. So yeah, this is where the expertise is definitely probably beyond Carolyn and I, but I can just sort of briefly say that it has to do with the database structure. So when I'm talking about, you know, the structure of each data set with its own metadata and each of the different fields or tables within that data set relating to the database. And we refer to the schema a lot in that way because we talk to our developer a lot, who is not on this webinar. But it also does bleed over a little bit into the data model and the actual just the format of the data as well. So those things are sort of treated all as one in the way that we presented it here, but the schema specifically is talking about a database structure.
And we should mention the schema is fully open. So if people are interested in grabbing that sort of off GitHub, it's there. I can't remember if we've already mentioned that, but putting a plug in for that here.
Thank you. And then I have another question. What is the process for contributing data to DataStream? Like if I were part of a community monitoring group, would it take me a long time to kind of get my data into the right shape to get it onto your platform and to get approved to do that?
So yeah, the process is quite straightforward. If someone's interested in contributing data, they just reach out to us. So there's the contacts on our website. And or to me or anybody really on the team, just letting us know, that you're interested in uploading. Actually, all the resources that somebody would need to be able to upload are all available on DataStream, and we're increasingly making sort of video tutorials on how to upload data. So there's tons and tons of resources there, but we are also really happy to help walk people through that. So often the biggest step is always the formatting of the data first to get it into the right sort of format so that DataStream can take it. But depending on where your data is at now, that can actually be done quite quickly. We actually have one of our colleagues has written scripts for groups before to help them just quickly transform their data into the WQX format before it's uploaded. So it all depends on the shape of the data, what shape the data is in now in terms of how long it might take to get it up and online.
Thank you. And then I have just a note from Bruno. He says, excellent presentation. And thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, happy to. And if anyone wants to follow up on any of the DataStream presentations, take a look in your chat window, and you'll have a lot of links, especially to the upcoming webinars. So thank you all for attending, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.